I discovered this branch of biochemistry that is a very kind of sacred biochemistry that connects to these archetypes. And both Alyssa and I have an interest in the more, I guess, physical or practical applications of astrology. And being that we both study herbs and plants and like to make medicines, this is just a really fascinating branch we both got into. Alyssa has a bodywork practice as well. And yeah, Alyssa, you can just introduce yourself and share how you got interested in the cell salts and how you work with them.
Sure. Thank you so much. And it's great to be here with you, talking about a topic that's really piqued my interest in the last, I would say like 7, 8 months. So Molly had introduced me to the book called The Zodiac and the Salts of Salvation by George W. Carey and Inez Perry. And as I've been reading through it, finding so many correspondences between what I was observing with my clients who would come in for massage therapy, and also clients that I'd be, interacting with through my plant working, herbal medicine practice. And so it's been very fascinating just to see through this lens of how the body is coming into manifestation, how the spirit is coming into manifestation, and the many kind of levels of that from an energetic point of view and also from a physical. So I'm really excited to kind of like dive into this with you and yeah, explore how we've kind of read and researched it, and also how we're starting to observe it just in our workings with people in our everyday life too.
Yeah, I'm excited. So, this little pictograph that came up is actually from the book Alyssa mentioned. And, as we see, it's the body kind of wrapped into this circle of the wheel of the zodiac. And as we know, there's correspondences just within the signs and the parts of the physical body. And as we'll see in the cell salts, the notion is that a lot of these cell salts pertain to those specific bodily functions. And the basic one of the basic forefathers of cell salts was this man named Schussler, and he's the one who basically he didn't. I don't want to say he discovered them because I think they were discovered earlier, but he was the first one to create this foundational work about them and really get them to be recognized in a more large way. And he basically identified 12 inorganic minerals present in each cell. So they're basically different forms of calcium, magnesium, iron, potassium, silica, and sodium, different kind of permutations, combinations of those. And basically his theory is that all disease, dis-ease, is a result of a deficiency of one or more of these 12 building blocks within an individual, which is really fascinating and seems very like simple in a way. And I think that's where it's very interesting because these cell salts are available in
Right.
these kind of capsule forms. But as we'll go through, they are available in foods, herbs, and it's very intertwined with the astroherbalism, I believe, that we can get a bigger picture of where we can get some of these tissue
Mhm.
salts.
Yeah, and one other thing to kind of add to that too is I think it's really fascinating to also see that through so many of the modern agricultural practices, how many of these salts, which would be naturally occurring in our soils, the earth soils, have been really depleted. So, we've heard, and many cultures have had for centuries old practices of using food as medicine, right? We have had that Hippocratic saying, like, let thy food be thy medicine. Well, we're also seeing that as so many of the earth's soils have been depleted of these mineral salts, individuals, even as they're able to access healthy food, which, is obviously a challenge related to also so many other systemic problems, we're not receiving that deep cellular food or nourishment that our bodies so readily and so desperately need. So I think it's really interesting to also kind of like look at, when these tissue salts were being discovered, and also kind of where we are now, and seeing that, these archetypes are like relevant for us to understand and to look at and to see where they're available and are in their more holistic form, right? So like naturally occurring in the plants. And then also, how does this compel us to also regenerate these energies on the earth itself? So I just wanted to put that into that, we're going to be approaching it from a variety of different vantage points there.
I love that point. It's really important, as monocropping, depletion of the soils are huge issues that, we just think, oh, if you eat veggies, that's enough. But the reason you might want to supplement with these cell salts in their capsule form, pill form, is what you just shared. And that's a very great point. And I do want to also mention that as we get deeper into this area of study, to always keep in mind that we are not responsible for how people use this information. And as always consult a medical practitioner that you trust before experimenting. Of course, these are very gentle homeopathic remedies. So that's why, we feel it's important to share this information, because for the most part, they're very subtle medicines. And as you can see, this is usually how you could find them in like a store if you were to go this route and take them as the cell salts sold like this. There's a variety of different brands, but basically they're titrated, meaning they're passed through a fine sieve. And depending on the number, kind of, you see 5x, 6x, that kind of determines how fine of a sieve that they pass through. So I believe the higher number, it's like the finer, more diluted cell salt.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Also, we'll mention that there is a and by the way, there's beyond just the 12. There's let me look it up, but I know there's more than the 12 were like the kind of foundational ones, but I know there's even more cell salts that they've later discovered.
Yeah, that's really helpful to know. Yeah, and one other thing that's kind of interesting from that point too is like in the book, they also will talk about how deficiency sometimes in like one particular salt will then also catalyze deficiencies or other kind of symptom pictures from other salts of, kind of like a synchronistic like archetype. So that's also something to look at. So in the same way that you can use them independently based upon, what you might be experiencing or what your sun or moon sign might be and how that relates to your deficiency, you can also be using them in combination.
Yeah, beautifully put, because you might see that the cell salt that works with Aries works well with the cell salt that works with Libra, the opposite of the axis, of that astrological axis. And like you mentioned, there's different schools of thoughts on which ones to use for which. Obviously, you can do a symptom-based pairing and just, kind of note the astrology, but not have to completely base it on the birth chart. But in many books I researched, sun sign or moon sign is used, and the moon sign is particularly seen as important in the first like 7-8 years of life for like a child that was born. And I've also read, and this is kind of the George Carey idea, that basically we're in utero for 3 months. Or sorry, we're not in utero for 3 months. Like we're born at 9 months. So we are out of the womb for 3 months, and those 3 months are the kind of 90-degree sphere of what we might be missing. So when a child is born, to immediately kind of offer the cell salts of those 3 months that they are not in the mother's womb right after they're born, because that's what they would have been, perhaps not been created while in utero. Really fascinating. And so I looked it up, and there's actually because I was recently visiting a naturopath and she was using her healing machine on me, which is a very advanced kind of technological thing that will give remedies. Perhaps maybe a little controversial, but very modern, futuristic. And some of the cell salts they were recommending for me were like number 17 and number 18. And I was like, how many are there? And now I just looked it up on the site that I ordered some of my cell salts from. And I found that there's like 27, which is fascinating because there's 27 nakshatras of the moon in Vedic astrology.
Really interesting.
Really, like that's getting super deep.
Definitely, yeah. Do some more research on and see how they correspond.
And the bioplasma is one that Alyssa and I have both worked with. And that's basically when in doubt, or say you're in a weak period, or you're maybe in flu season, or your body's not quite where it's at. Bioplasma is the combination of the foundational 12. And that is sold as its own entity. And there's just this quote that I have here that says, "These mineral salts, therefore the physical basis of all healing, regardless of the school employed. If these are absent from the blood and tissues, no permanent cure is possible." So this was a chemist who kind of expanded on Schussler's work. So it's kind of fascinating that these are just kind of the keys to creation. And of course, this really ties into the alchemical hermetic understanding of as above, so below, as within, so without. And the book that we've been referring to is called God, Man, the Word Made Flesh by George W. Carey and Inez Eudora Perry. And they were the ones who really symbolically connected the Zodiac understanding with these cell salts. And this wheel is kind of just a cool little pictograph.
Nice.
So yeah, here's another chart. Charts are kind of helpful when we're thinking of these things. Here, the salts are kind of listed in their elemental relationships. This could just be a good thing for folks to screenshot, to have handy. It's the correspondences of each sign with their respective cell salt. And as you'll notice, it's not necessary. It's not in the order that the numbers are. So that's just something to keep in mind if you're at the store picking these up. Yeah, we have the fire signs, the earth signs, the air signs, and the water signs.
Awesome.
Alrighty. So as I was mentioning, we're in the embryo for 9 months. So we basically fall short of completing a full solar year, which he calls a soul year. And those 3 months immediately out, is the time where maybe we didn't get those energies like fully integrated while we were in the womb.
Very interesting. I know it also brings to mind for me, like, there's a whole kind of realm of like practice and like honoring of time within certain midwifery traditions, right? So there's like the celebration of the child in womb who like completes the gestation cycle and grows at that 9-month period, and then also the celebration for the mother and the child as they're reaching their 9 months out of the womb. So I think too about how many like indigenous like medicine and care practices like really are like working to nourish both the mother and the baby, especially with all of these like really nourishing grounding foods, many of which we'll probably even see in the slides as we go into each one, but just that kind of full circle of completion. So like the completion of that 18 and thinking about, what's the influence on the child to have completed certain realms of progression and growth within in utero and then outside. And other realms of thought too, like I've seen, is also about like what aspects also are being kind of worked on from the astral. So like the emotional nature of the child, the energetic temperament, the personality. So all of these things that kind of develop later for the child after the physical body itself is completed.
Yes, so well put. I think they say that, speaking on that astral, I think that very much connects to the moon sign, right? In astrology, the soul body, you could say, that is the salts maybe then to turn to, say if you did just give birth and you're really into, working with this with your newborn, I would say, yeah, looking then at the moon sign and perhaps supplementing those lunar, with that lunar sign. So basically the sun, so the cell salt that corresponds with the sun is basically, the idea is by George Carey that it's consumed more rapidly. So whatever our sun sign is, we use that cell salt in our body more. And the moon is typically, if we're under emotional stress, we will use that more of our moon sign cell salt. So there could be, like, if someone's experiencing more anxiety, panic attacks, nervousness, they might want to work with the cell salt corresponding to the moon sign.
Awesome.
Whereas the sun, of course, being the more physical, vital force of the body, is just like what we're maybe constantly needing to supplement.
That's really interesting. How do you think the rising sign fits into this?
That's a great question. I would think that would be one to be aware of or to work in. Some people will work with that one, I think, as well. I think I read a book where they were saying either the sun, the moon, or the rising, but anything, yeah, because it's a prominent personalized energy in the chart. So I would think that could be experimented with.